Hello. I have been asked to do a watercolor of a building. Now, doing any drawing of a building or a watercolor of a building, you get to decide how you want to draw it. Do you want it to be realistic? Do you want it to be playful? Do you want it to be big? Do you want it to be small? Do you want it to have lots of detail? And we'll start with just these. So this is Mad King Ludwig's castle in Bavaria, and you've probably seen it on crossword puzzles. You've probably seen it on jigsaw puzzles and on record jackets and all sorts of stuff like that. It's a very famous castle, and it's in the middle of the mountains. So mountains are kind of fun too. So do you draw the mountains? You emphasize the mountains by making the castle smaller? Do you emphasize the castle by making it bigger? All sorts of different ways of doing it. None of them is right, or none of them is wrong, I should say. It depends on what you want to do. So you can be realistic, you can be very hyper-realistic, you can make your drawing almost look like a photograph, or you can have fun. And I did these while looking at an image of the castle, but when I turned away from the image and just used my little brain to come up with other variations, I was having more fun, and I think you can still tell that this is Mad King Ludwig's castle, but you're not constricted by reality. You can have fun. So, okay, let's just do this right. I'm trying to get a piece of paper here. Now, this is bigger than I wanted, but that's okay. So just cut it in half. You have 4 pieces of paper. I grabbed 2 by mistake. So I'm putting the pictures aside. I'm not using anything but my little brain in trying to remember what the castle looked like. Because oftentimes when you do, if you're looking at a picture all the time, you might let the picture tell you too much. Sometimes you want to look at a picture or look at the thing that you're trying to draw because you're trying to be realistic about it. But right now I'm trying to be less realistic and more just fun. And it's a castle, it's a storybook castle, and if it had unicorns in Bavaria, there would be unicorns on this castle too. But it had a square turret, it had rounded turrets, it had square round turrets on top of square towers. It just had all sorts of stuff going on. And then it was surrounded by mountains in the background and thousands of pine trees in the foreground. So it sort of suddenly appeared almost by magic in the middle of this fairy tale landscape. So I'm just having fun with it, as you can see, because I'm not letting things like facts get in the way. I'm making a drawing using alternative impressions, maybe even real impressions, but again, I'm not letting facts get in the way. I'm letting my memory of the image rule what I do. There were some lakes in the background too. It wasn't enough that there was mountains and trees and forests. There was also a lake. Now, how do I make this interesting? Right now it's kind of boring, but I'll add some candy stripes on it. How about that? these were not on the original thing, but why not put them here? I mean, think of the Russian Orthodox Church in the Kremlin with its patterns of brickwork. And onion domes and gold leaf and whatever it has. And we can do that here too. Did this have I think this had a tower on top. I once recently drew the Trinity Church in Boston, which has pattern on top of pattern on top of pattern. So if I'm, adding patterns to the building, should I add patterns to the trees and to the mountains? I think so. I mean, part of drawing is to make it all look like it belongs in the same universe. I just dipped this pen, I didn't fill it, which is why it's acting up. But, this still looks like King Ludwig's castle, except it's playful. And playfulness might be fun sometimes. Sometimes you don't want it to be playful, but you want it to be serious and realistic. But think of the sculptures or stylized sculptures you might see on an Art Deco building. Humans don't have the muscles in the places and the quantities and the shapes of an Art Deco sculpture of a muscular man or woman, or whatever. They have their curves. Curves on humans are not made with a compass. They are made with maybe a French curve, but even that's too graceful. Humans are more complicated than that. And so if we're stylizing humans, why can't we stylize this castle, which is already, over the top and then some. So, I could leave it like this and is fun, or I can maybe add some watercolor, or I'm just using a wet brush here, and I'm just gonna see what happens when I play with letting the ink bleed. And we get a different sort of look to it, which is fun. Again, I'm using a big old chunky brush, which I specifically chose because it's big and fat, and I'm not able. If I used a thinner brush, which I may use in a minute, it may make me want to be more tight. And this drawing I specifically did so it was loose and sort of free and fun. And if I used a very fine brush like this one, I might feel I'm too trapped into, staying inside of the lines all the time. If I started with this brush, I kind of like doing it now, where I can be a little bit more exact. Like here, I'm going to make this turret roof have a checkerboard pattern. So I want to make sure that I stay inside the shape I want. Other times, like the windows here, I did a little bit less exact. I once did a drawing, I don't remember even what it was, and the person who was hiring me or watching me draw it, or I don't even remember now, they didn't like it because I was messy. And messiness, I'm trying to make it not look like a photograph. You know, a photograph ends up showing you too much. And the too much it shows you is often boring and uninteresting. So now we're able to have it have more life, more fun. Maybe by drawing it the way I drew it here. I'll try another one. Got another piece of paper. I'm going to start now with again, I'm not looking at Mad King Ludwig's castle. I'm just remembering, since I drew it now 6 times this morning. Let me see if I can, this is a brush with blue ink in it. Let's see if I can sort of do a different version of the castle. Here I'm trying to imagine looking at this castle sometimes when I do sometimes very quick sketches, when I'm trying to plan it out in my head, I'll do a drawing where I'll try to I'll try to represent the object in like 10 brush strokes only. You know, how can I capture the gesture of the place or the thing or the human or the dog or the cat or whatever I'm doing with just the most minimal strokes. And sometimes it's successful, and other times it's very unsuccessful. You know, the thing that I'm drawing is just far too complicated a thing to be able to capture with an abbreviated palette or abbreviated stroke. So, no, this one did not work. Now, how can I make it work? Is there a way to make it work? Using this brush. Just if I was on a desert island and I had one chance to make this drawing, how would I represent it? Maybe I would instead, maybe I would do it this way. Here's the forest, here's the mountains. A lake. More mountains and trees in the foreground. And right here is where the castle's going to go. But what I'm trying to do is I'm sort of trying to write a melody with one of those children's pianos, you know, that have maybe 10 keys, 10 buttons to press. And you know, how can you possibly make something beautiful with just that? So already I'm finding I'm becoming too detailed. So I'm trying to, again, just think, how can I convey the place that I'm drawing using the vocabulary, the tool that I have. See, again, adding those 3 dots was not helpful. There's a big Strumendrong sky there. But even this is clearly Mad King Ludwig's castle. Almost anyone could recognize it based on this image. I like this one. This one's kind of fun. This one I like too. Just it's playful and fun. And these again are realistic. There's nothing wrong with any of these necessarily. They just all are different ways of capturing the same thing. Okay, I'll do one more here. And I'm just going to use pen and ink. And I want to be playful with this one. So I'm going to use this ink pen, and again, my imagination, my remembrance of it. So I'm going to make it sort of calligraphic. You know, I'm not using a ruler. No ruler in this image. There's the mountains in the background, the tree line. My plan of how I wanted to draw the trees changed in the middle of my drawing the trees here. So I'm changing the perspective here a little bit. I know these towers aren't that big, but I've made them that big. And there's not columns, but there's pilasters, sort of pilasters on this facade. This is done with red terracotta. This is the driveway up. And there's the big square tower here with 3 vaulted shaped things that goes up to a cone up here. And then in the background we have another thing that has even more towers going on top. So this is sort of similar to the one that I just did, but I'm not gonna add ink wash on this one. My curlicue stuff here is supposed to represent trees. One of the things that I sort of did not convey with the other drawings is sort of a light source and shadowing. So I'm sort of trying to do that here. So even though I'm being playful with perspective and details, I'm being somewhat realistic with the light source. Well, this didn't work out. Let's pretend my original plan was to add ink wash. So I'm just going to do that. Again, using my big moppy brush, and this ink that I'm using is water soluble, so it'll cause the ink to bleed. I want the castle is sort of white in the middle of this, dark forest kind of a thing. And so I want it to sort of stand out as being white. So I'm going to leave some areas white. Okay, I'm just going to throw caution to the wind here. My little brush. When I go fast and there's little bits of white that don't get filled in, that's what watercolor paper is supposed to do. It's supposed to have areas that are not that the ink or the watercolor does not extend into, keeps it sharp and I'm sure that there's a term that I don't know, not a watercolorist, but it just helps it keep it vibrant and whatnot. Okay, well, so here's another version. So there's many ways to draw Mad King Ludwig's little secret hideaway. I guess it isn't too secret since 1 million people had to make it, and you can't help but look at it when you're in that part of the town. But I guess what happened inside was kind of a secret. You had these little Wagnerian inspired grottos and magical kind of stuff happening. Anyway, there you go.